The coffee had gone cold 3 hours ago, but I kept the mug close anyway, its ceramic warmth the only comfort during the dead hours of third shift. Peterson Space Force Base at 0347 hours belonged to humming servers and the hypnotic pulse of status lights across my 6-monitor array. As lead satellite systems engineer, I'd grown comfortable with the rhythm of routine maintenance checks, the predictable dance of diagnostics, telemetry updates, and orbital adjustments that kept America's military satellites operational. Until the rhythm shattered. What the hell? The words escaped before I could stop them. Guardian 7's position indicator had jumped 12 degrees northeast without authorization. My fingers flew across the keyboard, muscle memory pulling up command logs while my brain tried to process what I was seeing. Empty. No recorded instructions, no maintenance schedule, no automated drift corrections. Nothing. The metallic taste of adrenaline flooded my mouth. In 5 years of managing military communication satellites, I'd never seen an unauthorized repositioning. These weren't civilian weather satellites that could drift. Guardian 7 was part of our nuclear command network, locked in geosynchronous orbit with triple redundant positioning thrusters and encrypted command protocols. I initiated a full diagnostic sweep of the Milstar constellation. The progress bar crawled across my screen while the facility's air conditioning cycled on, sending a chill through my government-issued polo shirt. Around me, banks of servers hummed their electronic lullabies, but something felt wrong. The usual pattern of green status lights seemed erratic, desynchronized, like a heartbeat skipping beats. Then the sweep results populated, and my world collapsed. Guardian 7, position altered, 12.7 degrees northeast, geosync lock broken. Sentinel 3, position altered, 8.3 degrees southwest, geosync lock broken. Watchdog 11, position altered, 15.1 degrees southeast, geosync lock broken. Overwatch 6, position altered, 22.4 degrees northwest, geosync lock broken. For satellites, for critical nodes in our nuclear command infrastructure, all repositioned without authorization. The implications hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. These weren't random drifts. The positioning was surgical, calculated. Someone was redirecting our military satellites, and they had access to encryption keys that took the NSA months to develop. I reached for the secure phone to contact Colonel Martinez, but my hand froze halfway to the receiver. Something metallic glinted on the floor beside my workstation, partially hidden under a bundle of fiber optic cables. I bent down and picked it up, my throat constricting. Giselle's ID badge. The laminated plastic was still warm from the floor heating, her photo smiling back at me with those familiar green eyes that matched my own. But Giselle worked IT security on Alpha Shift. She shouldn't have been in the satellite control room. Ever. Her clearance was administrative, not operational. The badge felt heavier than it should, and I noticed the magnetic strip on the back had been damaged, deliberate scratches that would prevent it from logging access. My sister's security clearance was actually higher than mine, high enough to access subsystems I couldn't even see in my interface. High enough to reposition satellites if she knew the right commands. No, I whispered, but the evidence sat in my palm like a lead weight. Electronic squealing erupted from the speakers as another diagnostic completed. Guardian 7 was now positioned directly over downtown Denver. Sentinel 3 aimed at Seattle. Watchdog 11 locked onto Chicago. Overwatch 6 targeted Los Angeles. The 4 largest population centers on the West Coast and Mountain West, arranged in a perfect cross pattern. My hands shook as I pulled up the satellite payload configurations. Communications arrays, yes, but also deployment systems. The kind designed to coordinate nuclear responses. The kind that could be repurposed for offensive operations if someone had the right access codes. A new alert flashed red across my screen. Unauthorized command sequence detected. Guardian 7 payload activation initiated. T-46:23:2 deployment. The facility's emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in hellish red. Somewhere in the distance, a klaxon began its mechanical wail. The air recycling system shifted into high gear, creating a low vibration that seemed to come from the concrete walls themselves. Static electricity made my hair stand on end as the server room's electromagnetic field intensified. I had 2 choices. Follow protocol, secure the facility, contact my superior, let the chain of command handle it while 46 minutes ticked away. Or investigate personally, find out why my sister's damaged badge was in a restricted area, and why our nuclear command satellites were being repositioned over major American cities. The secure phone rang, cutting through the alarm noise like a knife. Colonel Martinez's voice crackled through the speaker. "Chin, what's your status? We're seeing anomalous readings from your sector." "Colonel," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "we have a critical problem. Four satellites have been repositioned without authorization. Guardian 7 is showing payload activation sequences with a 46-minute countdown." Static filled the line for 5 seconds. When Martinez's voice returned, it was sharp with urgency. "Felix, I need you to lock down your station and report to the command bunker immediately. Do not attempt any corrections until we have a full security sweep." Through the red emergency lighting, I watched my monitors flicker with new data streams. More satellites were moving, their positions shifting in real time. Whatever was happening, it was accelerating beyond the initial 4. "Colonel, I'm seeing additional movement on Sentinel-3 and Watchdog 11. This isn't a system malfunction. Someone is actively controlling our satellites with valid encryption keys." "Felix, that's a direct order. Lock down and report to Bunker Level B7 immediately." The line went dead. I stared at Giselle's badge, then at the screens showing satellites moving into position over America's largest cities. The payload activation timer on Guardian 7 showed 45:47 and counting down. In the corner of my screen, new alerts were cascading. DEFCON status elevating, additional satellite movements detected, communication arrays being redirected. 45 minutes until what? What kind of payload could a communications satellite deploy over a civilian population? The technical specs were classified beyond my clearance, but the targeting pattern was unmistakable. This wasn't random, it was surgical. I stood up, Giselle's badge clutched in my fist. The emergency lighting cast dancing shadows across the server room, and the electronic equipment around me seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. Every instinct screamed that following orders meant abandoning any chance of stopping whatever was happening. The chain of command was designed for normal threats, not for attacks from within our own systems. But my sister's badge in my hand meant family was involved. And 45 minutes might be all the time left to figure out why. I made my choice. Instead of heading to the bunker, I moved deeper into the facility's restricted areas, where the real satellite control systems lived, where answers waited in the dark, beyond the reach of protocol and procedure. The klaxon wailed behind me as I walked away from safety, toward whatever truth my sister had left me to find. The countdown timer burned in my mind, 45:12, 45:11, 45:10. The restricted access tunnel stretched ahead like a concrete throat, its forced air circulation creating a constant low hum that seemed to vibrate through my bones. Fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows against reinforced walls, each one a reminder that I was descending deeper into the classified heart of Peterson Space Force Base. Giselle's damaged badge felt like a lead weight in my pocket, its scratched magnetic strip a piece of evidence I couldn't ignore. 37 minutes until Guardian 7's payload deployment. I'd lost 8 precious minutes navigating security checkpoints, burning through my emergency override codes to bypass systems that normally required Colonel Martinez's direct authorization. Each breach of protocol felt like career suicide, but careers meant nothing when American cities hung in the balance. The facility's architecture transformed as I descended. Gone were the standard-issue government hallways. Down here, everything was reinforced steel and electromagnetic shielding, so dense it made my digital watch flicker and die. Biometric scanners red-eyed me at every checkpoint, their laser sweeps creating brief moments of retinal afterburn in the sterile air. The Deep Operations Center sat behind a vault door that required both retinal scan and voice authentication. As the massive steel barrier rolled aside, revealing the facility's true nerve center, I understood why my sister's clearance was higher than mine. This wasn't just satellite control, it was the nexus of America's nuclear command network, a subterranean cathedral of classified technology. Banks of quantum processors lined the walls, their supercooled cores humming with barely contained energy. Holographic displays showed real-time orbital positions of every military satellite in the constellation, their trajectories rendered in 3 dimensions above a central control platform. The air itself felt charged, filled with the ozone scent of high-voltage electronics and the metallic tang of ionization. But what I saw on the displays made my engineering mind reel. The entire Milstar constellation was repositioning, Not just the original 4 satellites, but dozens of them, moving with clockwork precision over every major population center in North America. New York, Miami, Dallas, Phoenix, San Francisco. The holographic display showed a constellation of death hovering over American cities like digital vultures. Standing amid this chaos was Commander Hugo Restrepo, Peterson's Deputy Operations Director. I'd seen his photo in classified briefings, but in person, he radiated the kind of authority that came from surviving wars most people never heard about. His silver hair remained perfectly groomed despite the emergency, his dress uniform crisp with ribbons that told stories of classified victories and buried defeats. "Felix Chun," he said without turning around, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "I was wondering when you'd find your way down here." "Commander, we need to follow protocol." Hugo's steel-gray eyes fixed on mine as he turned. "But since you're here, and since you've already violated about 15 security regulations to get here, you might as well make yourself useful." My engineering training let me parse the technical specifications faster than a typical analyst, but what I deciphered made my blood crystallize in my veins. These weren't just communications arrays, they were weapons platforms disguised as standard satellite infrastructure. Each repositioned satellite carried directed energy systems capable of generating electromagnetic pulses powerful enough to permanently disable electronics across entire metropolitan areas. "EMP weapons," I said, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. "They're positioning EMP weapons over every major American city." Hugo's fingers moved across the holographic interface with practiced precision, trying to regain control of the satellite network. Electromagnetic pulse weapons that can cripple infrastructure without leaving radiation signatures. Traditional nuclear strikes create fallout. Bad for business if you want to occupy territory afterward. But targeted EMP attacks? They'll send us back to the Stone Age while keeping the real estate pristine. The horror of it hit me like a physical force. An EMP attack wouldn't just knock out power grids. It would permanently fry every electronic device in the affected area. Hospital life support systems, transportation networks, communication infrastructure, even automobiles built after 1970 would become expensive paperweights. Tens of millions of people would be trapped in dead cities, cut off from the outside world, dependent on whatever help could reach them through the electromagnetic wasteland. "Who's orchestrating this?" I demanded, watching the countdown timers tick away like digital death sentences. "How did they penetrate our encryption?" Hugo's expression turned granite hard. "The attack is too sophisticated for external hackers. They'd need insider knowledge of our system architecture, access to classified protocols, and real-time intelligence on our security rotations. This is being coordinated by someone with intimate knowledge of our operations, someone who knows exactly how to exploit our vulnerabilities." A crimson alert flashed across the displays. "Sentinel, 3 payload activation initiated, T-31:47 to deployment." "2 satellites armed now," Hugo muttered, his commands flowing through the interface like a pianist playing a deadly sonata. "They're bringing weapons online in sequence, probably to prevent us from implementing a mass shutdown protocol. Whoever's running this operation understands our defensive capabilities better than we do." The facility's intercom erupted with mechanical authority. "All personnel to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Code Black initiated. All non-essential personnel evacuate to secondary bunkers immediately." Through the reinforced walls, I could hear the bass rumble of boots on concrete. The base's security forces mobilizing for an unknown threat. But down here in the deep operations center, surrounded by electromagnetic shielding that made us invisible to the outside world, we were completely isolated from the chaos above. "Commander," I said, pulling out Giselle's badge, "I found this in the satellite control room. My sister's clearance is high enough to access these systems, but she works Alpha Shift. She shouldn't have been in the facility at 0347 hours." Hugo's steel-gray eyes locked onto the badge with laser intensity. "This magnetic strip has been deliberately damaged. Someone used it to bypass our logging systems. They could have been here for hours without leaving a digital trail." He looked up at me. "Felix, your sister is either a traitor or she's been compromised. Either way, she's the key to understanding how our security was breached." "What are you saying?" The words came out sharper than I intended, but the implications were clear. "I'm saying your sister's clearance gave someone access to our most classified systems." Hugo's voice carried no accusation, just cold tactical analysis. Felix, I need you to access the quantum processing core and trace the source of these unauthorized commands. Your engineering background might let you identify patterns that military analysts would miss. The quantum core occupied its own chamber behind blast doors that could survive a direct nuclear strike. As I approached the superconducting cylinder, the electromagnetic field made my skin crawl and my teeth ache. The air itself seemed to vibrate with barely contained energy, creating a metallic taste that coated my tongue like copper pennies. Connecting my diagnostic interface to the core's access port felt like plugging into the nervous system of a sleeping giant. Data streams flowed across my screen in torrents, command sequences, encryption keys, satellite positioning protocols, all of it quantum entangled into the secure communications network that linked our satellites to ground control. But buried in the chaos, I found something that made my hands shake uncontrollably. "Commander," I called out, my voice tight with disbelief. "I'm seeing command sequences that originated from this facility." The satellite repositioning orders came from inside Peterson. Hugo materialized beside me, his face carved from granite. "When?" "The first commands were sent at 0127 hours. I checked the duty roster on my tablet, hoping I was wrong. That's during Charlie's shift. Giselle would have been off duty, but someone with her clearance and access codes was here." Hugo's hand moved instinctively to the sidearm at his hip. "Felix, I need you to understand the magnitude of what we're facing. If this attack succeeds, every major city in America will be sent back to the pre-electronic age. Millions will die from infrastructure collapse, medical equipment failure, and social breakdown. We're not just talking about a power outage, we're talking about the systematic destruction of American civilization." The quantum core's displays suddenly flickered, revealing new data streams that made my blood run cold. More satellites were coming online, their targeting systems locking onto coordinates with mechanical precision. But something else caught my attention: communication protocols that didn't match our standard military encryption. "Commander, I'm detecting external communication links. Our satellites are now receiving commands from outside the facility. Someone has established a remote connection to our network." Hugo's eyes blazed with understanding. "Classic penetration protocol. Use an insider to establish the initial breach, then maintain control from an external command structure. They used your sister's access to open the door, then set up their own communication network to take over our satellites." A new voice suddenly cut through the facility's intercom system. Not the automated announcements, but a human voice speaking with calm authority. "Attention Peterson Space Force Base. You have 28 minutes to evacuate all personnel to minimum safe distance. Guardian, 7 and Sentinel, 3 will demonstrate the effectiveness of our capabilities. Compliance with subsequent demands will prevent additional deployments." The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop 10 degrees. Hugo's hand tightened on his weapon as the implications became clear. "They're not just threatening cities," he said grimly. "They're planning to use them as demonstration targets. Felix, we need to regain control of our satellites, and we need to do it in the next 28 minutes." I stared at the quantum core's displays, watching countdown timers tick away like digital death sentences. Somewhere in this facility, my sister's damaged badge had been the key that unlocked America's destruction. And somewhere outside, unknown enemies were preparing to demonstrate their power by crippling American cities. "Commander," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos surrounding us, "I think I can trace their external communication link. But I'll need access to the primary satellite control systems, and I'll need someone who understands our security architecture better than anyone." Hugo nodded grimly. "Then we need to find your sister, Felix. She's the only one who can help us understand how this attack was orchestrated from the inside. And we have 27 minutes to get answers before American cities start going dark." The quantum core hummed with malevolent energy as we prepared to dive deeper into the facility's most classified systems. Outside, the countdown continued its relentless march toward demonstration and destruction. But down here in the electromagnetic cathedral of America's nuclear command network, we still had 27 minutes to fight back. 27 minutes to save civilization. 27 minutes to uncover the truth about my sister's role in the greatest attack on American soil since Pearl Harbor. 27 minutes to prevent the systematic destruction of everything we'd sworn to protect. The countdown timer on my screen read 26:43 and falling. Time was running out, but we weren't finished yet. The blast doors to the primary satellite control chamber responded to Hugo's command codes with mechanical precision, their 3-foot-thick steel barriers rolling aside with hydraulic whispers. The revealed space hit me like a physical blow, a cathedral of classified technology that hummed with barely contained power. Banks of quantum processors lined the walls, their supercooled cores generating electromagnetic interference, so intense that my engineering tablet died instantly, its screen flickering to black with a sharp electronic death rattle. The air itself felt charged, crackling with static electricity that made my skin crawl and my teeth ache, filled with the sharp ozone scent of high-voltage electronics and something else, the metallic tang of fierce sweat and desperation. 24 minutes until Guardian 7's demonstration on Miami. The countdown timer dominated the central holographic display like a digital guillotine, its blood-red digits reflecting off surfaces that had been polished to mirror brightness for optimal electromagnetic shielding. Each second that ticked away represented thousands of lives hanging in the balance. Families eating breakfast, commuters heading to work, children walking to school, all of them completely unaware that their electronic world was about to die in a burst of invisible energy. Felix. The voice came from the shadows behind the quantum core array, soft and familiar, and filled with guilt that hit me like a physical blow. I knew you'd find your way down here eventually. Giselle stepped into the harsh fluorescent light, and I barely recognized my sister. Still wearing her civilian clothes from the night shift that had ended 6 hours ago, she looked like she'd aged years in a single day. Her dark hair hung in disheveled strands, her usually immaculate appearance destroyed by exhaustion and something deeper, the hollow-eyed look of someone who'd discovered they'd helped architect their own country's destruction. Her hands trembled as she gripped a military-grade tablet displaying satellite control protocols I'd never seen before, code structures that made my engineering mind reel with their complexity. Jesus Christ, Giselle. I breathed, the words feeling like broken glass in my throat. What have you done? I've been trying to fix it, she said, her voice cracking with exhaustion and barely contained panic. I've been down here for 3 hours trying to regain control of the satellite network. But the encryption is beyond anything I've ever encountered. They're using quantum entanglement protocols that shouldn't exist outside of theoretical physics papers. Hugo's hand moved instinctively to his sidearm, his military training overriding family considerations as he assessed the potential threat. Ma'am, I need you to step away from that console and explain your presence in this facility. You're in violation of multiple security protocols. I can explain everything, Giselle said, raising her hands but maintaining her grip on the tablet. But first, you need to understand what we're really dealing with. This isn't just a satellite hijacking. It's a weapons demonstration for something that will make Pearl Harbor look like a training exercise. The quantum core's displays suddenly erupted with new data streams, showing communication links that bypassed our standard military encryption entirely. External command sequences flowed through the network like digital poison, repositioning satellites with mechanical precision over their target coordinates. But what caught my engineering eye was something else. Architectural details in the code that looked disturbingly familiar, like seeing your own house key in a burglar's hand. Giselle, I said, studying the command protocols on her tablet, these encryption patterns. I've seen this code structure before. This is advanced persistent threat architecture, state-sponsored cyber warfare tools. Who are you working with? My sister's face crumpled like paper. I'm not working with anyone. Felix, I discovered this attack 3 days ago during routine network maintenance. Someone has been using our satellite constellation to test weapons systems, and they've been doing it for months. Hugo stepped forward, his steel-gray eyes locked onto Giselle with laser intensity. Ma'am, explain your presence in this facility and your knowledge of classified systems. Start from the beginning. Giselle's hands shook as she pulled up archived data on her tablet. 6 months ago, I was assigned to a joint project with Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin. We were developing new satellite communication protocols for the next generation of military satellites. The project was classified, but the work was legitimate, or so I thought. The facility's intercom crackled with mechanical authority. Sentinel, 3 payload activation complete. Guardian, 7 targeting systems online. Demonstration will proceed in T-minus 22:15. 22 minutes, Hugo muttered, his fingers flying across the holographic interface. Giselle, I need you to explain how external commands are controlling our satellites. This is beyond typical cyber warfare. They're using our own systems against us with precision that suggests intimate knowledge of our architecture. Because they helped design it, Giselle said, her voice barely above a whisper. The contractors I worked with, they weren't just developing communication protocols. They were building backdoors into our satellite network. Remote access systems that could override our security from anywhere in the world. The horrible truth hit me like a physical force. Industrial espionage. They used legitimate defense contracts to build vulnerabilities into our most critical systems. Worse than that, Giselle continued, her tablet showing architectural diagrams that made my engineering mind reel. They've been testing these systems for months, using our own satellites to conduct reconnaissance on American infrastructure. Every power grid, every communication hub, every critical system in the country has been mapped and analyzed. This demonstration isn't just about showing their capabilities, it's about proving they can cripple our entire civilization. Hugo's expression turned granite hard. Who's orchestrating this attack? Are we dealing with foreign intelligence services? I don't know, Giselle admitted, her voice cracking with frustration. The communication protocols are routed through servers in 12 different countries. The encryption is quantum level, and the command structure is designed to be untraceable. But Felix, I've been monitoring their communications for the past 3 hours, and I've identified something important. She pulled up a real-time communication log on her tablet, showing data streams that flowed like digital rivers through the satellite network. They're not just planning to demonstrate on Miami. There are 3 additional satellites being repositioned over Washington, D.C., New York, and Los Angeles. This isn't a demonstration, it's the opening move in a coordinated attack. The quantum core's displays suddenly flickered, revealing new satellite positions that made my blood crystallize. 4 EMP weapons platforms now hung over America's most critical cities like digital swords of Damocles. The targeting systems were online, the weapons were armed, and the countdown timers showed synchronized deployment across all 4 locations. Simultaneous strikes, Hugo breathed, his tactical mind processing the implications. They're planning to cripple our government, our financial systems, and our military command structure in a single coordinated attack. Felix, this is Pearl Harbor with electromagnetic weapons. A new voice suddenly cut through the facility's intercom system. Not the automated announcements, but a human voice speaking with calm authority and a slight accent I couldn't place. Attention Peterson Space Force Base. You have 21 minutes to witness the effectiveness of our capabilities. Guardian, 7 will demonstrate on Miami at precisely 0800 hours. Subsequent compliance with our demands will prevent additional deployments over Washington, New York, and Los Angeles. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop 10 degrees. Hugo's hand tightened on his weapon as the implications became clear. They're using Miami as a demonstration target, he said grimly. They want to show the world that America's electronic infrastructure is completely vulnerable. Felix, we need to regain control of our satellites, and we need to do it in the next 21 minutes. I've been trying, Giselle said, her fingers flying across her tablet with desperate precision. But the quantum encryption is adaptive. Every time I try to break their control, the system evolves to counter my attempts. It's like fighting artificial intelligence that's been specifically designed to defeat our countermeasures. I stared at the quantum core's displays, watching countdown timers tick away like digital death sentences. But something in the architecture diagrams caught my attention, a pattern that looked familiar from my engineering background. Giselle, I said, studying the command protocols more closely, these backdoor systems you worked on, do they have any kind of emergency override built into them? Emergency override? She looked up from her tablet, hope flickering in her exhausted eyes. Felix, there might be something. The original development contract included fail-safe protocols in case the systems were compromised. But activating them would require what? Hugo demanded, his voice tight with urgency. Physical access to the satellite control systems, administrative privileges, and a quantum encryption key that only exists in the development servers. Giselle's face paled as the implications hit her. Felix, the key is stored in the Northrop Grumman facility in Colorado Springs. We'd need to access their development servers and extract the override codes. That's 30 miles away, Hugo said, checking his watch. We don't have time for a retrieval mission. But we might have another option, I said, pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. Giselle, you said you've been monitoring their communications for 3 hours. Have you been able to identify the source of their command signals? I've traced them to a mobile command center somewhere in the Colorado Springs area, she said, pulling up geographic data on her tablet. The signal strength suggests they're operating from within a 5-mile radius of the city. But Felix, even if we could locate them, we'd still need the override codes to regain control of our satellites. The facility's lights suddenly flickered, and the quantum core's displays showed a new message that made my hands shake. Backup systems activated. Communications offline. Manual override required for satellite control. Hugo's eyes blazed with understanding. They've severed our communication links with the outside world. We're completely isolated down here. No contact with Washington, no way to coordinate with other military units, no backup support. Felix, we're on our own. Not necessarily, Giselle said, her voice gaining strength. I've been maintaining an encrypted communication link with my development team. If we can reach the Northrop Grumman facility, we might be able to access the override codes remotely. How? I demanded, studying the facility's schematics. We're in an electromagnetic bunker 50 feet underground. There's no way to establish external communications from here. There's a communication array on the surface, Giselle said, pointing to architectural diagrams on her tablet. It's designed for emergency communications during lockdown procedures. If we can reach it, we might be able to establish contact with the outside world. Hugo nodded grimly. The surface array is 2 levels up and protected by security systems designed to prevent unauthorized access. But if it's our only option, we'll have to take the risk. The countdown timer on the central display read 1847 and falling. 18 minutes until Miami went dark. 18 minutes to prevent the systematic destruction of American civilization. 18 minutes to save millions of lives. Felix, Hugo said, his voice carrying the weight of command, I need you to make a choice. We can try to reach the surface communication array and attempt to coordinate with external forces, or we can stay down here and try to regain control of our satellites using whatever resources we have available. But we can't do both. I looked at my sister, her face pale with exhaustion and guilt, then at Hugo, his steel-gray eyes reflecting the burden of impossible choices. Outside, unknown enemies were preparing to demonstrate their power by crippling American cities. Down here in the electromagnetic cathedral of America's nuclear command network, we had 18 minutes to fight back. Commander, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos surrounding us, I think our best chance is to combine both approaches. Giselle stays here and continues trying to break their encryption. You and I head to the surface array and try to coordinate with the Northrop Grumman facility. If we can get those override codes, we might be able to regain control of our satellites. Hugo nodded, his tactical mind already planning the route to the surface. Agreed. But Felix, you need to understand the magnitude of what we're facing. If we fail, American civilization, as we know it, will end in 18 minutes. Are you prepared for that responsibility? I stared at the countdown timer, watching digital seconds tick away like heartbeats. Somewhere above us, Miami was about to become a demonstration target. Somewhere in Colorado Springs, unknown enemies were preparing to change the world forever. And down here in the depths of Peterson Space Force Base, 3 people were America's last hope. I'm ready, I said, checking my equipment one final time. Let's go save our country. The countdown timer read 1752 and falling. Time was running out, but we weren't finished yet. The emergency stairwell stretched above us like a concrete throat, each step echoing with metallic authority as Hugo and I climbed toward the surface communication array. Emergency lighting cast harsh shadows on reinforced walls designed to withstand nuclear bombardment, their surfaces gleaming with condensation that made every handhold treacherous. The air grew thinner as we ascended, filled with the sharp scent of concrete dust and something else, the acrid smell of electrical systems pushed beyond their design limits. 14 minutes until Miami went dark. The countdown lived in my head now, each second ticking away like a hammer blow against my skull. Behind us, 50 feet below ground, Giselle remained alone in the quantum cathedral, her fingers flying across interfaces that might as well have been alien technology for all the good they were doing her. The thought of leaving her down there made my chest tighten with guilt. But Hugo was right. We couldn't fight this battle from multiple fronts. Felix, stop! Hugo's voice cut through the stairwell's echo, his hand raised in a tactical gesture that made my blood freeze. Motion sensors. 3rd level landing. I followed his gaze to barely visible infrared beams crossing the landing above us, part of the base's lockdown security system. Hugo pulled out his command tablet, its screen casting blue light across his weathered features as he accessed override protocols. Security system's been compromised, he muttered, studying readouts that made no sense to my engineering mind. Someone's modified the access codes. The infrared grid is active, but it's not following standard patterns. Meaning what? I asked, though the cold knot in my stomach already knew the answer. Meaning we're not alone down here. Hugo's hand moved to his sidearm, the gesture smooth and practiced. The security modifications are recent, within the last 6 hours. Someone with administrative access has been preparing for our arrival. The stairwell's emergency lighting suddenly flickered, and for a moment we were plunged into darkness, so complete it felt like being buried alive. When the lights returned, casting their harsh glow across concrete walls, I saw something that made my engineering mind reel with horror. Fresh footprints in the dust, boot treads that led up the stairs ahead of us, disappearing into the darkness of the upper levels. "Hugo," I whispered, my voice barely audible above the ventilation system's mechanical breathing. "How many people have access to these emergency protocols?" "Fewer than a dozen," he replied, his tactical mind already calculating threats and responses. "Base personnel with level 5 clearance and above." "But Felix, those footprints are fresh, made within the last hour. Someone's been moving through the facility while we were dealing with the satellite crisis." The implications hit me like physical blows. While we'd been focused on the external threat, someone inside Peterson Space Force Base had been preparing for our response. The precision of the attack, the timing of the security modifications, the knowledge of our emergency protocols, this wasn't just foreign cyber warfare. This was betrayal from within. "Commander," I said, studying the infrared grid pattern on his tablet, "I think I can bypass the motion sensors. My engineering background includes electronic security systems. Give me 2 minutes." Hugo nodded grimly, but his eyes remained fixed on the stairs above us. 2 minutes. "But Felix, we need to assume we're walking into a trap. Someone inside this facility has been coordinating with the satellite attackers." I pulled out my emergency toolkit, grateful for the redundant systems that engineers always carried. The infrared grid was sophisticated, but it followed standard military specifications that I'd studied during my security clearance process. Cross-referencing frequencies, identifying blind spots, calculating angles of approach. It was just another engineering problem to solve. But as I worked, connecting bypass circuits and rerouting power flows, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The stairwell's concrete walls seemed to press inward, and the emergency lighting cast shadows that moved independently of our positions. Someone was monitoring our progress, tracking our movements, preparing for our arrival at the surface array. "Done," I said, watching the infrared grid flicker off. "But Hugo, we need to move fast. The bypass will only last for about 10 minutes before the system detects the modification." We climbed the remaining stairs in tactical silence, Hugo's military training evident in every calculated movement. The concrete walls gave way to reinforced steel as we approached the surface level, and I could hear something that made my chest tighten with dread. The sound of electronic equipment humming with power, voices speaking in languages I didn't recognize, and the mechanical clicking of weapons being prepared. The surface communication array wasn't empty. Our enemies had found it first. "Felix," Hugo whispered, his voice barely audible, "I count at least 3 hostiles in the communication center. They're speaking Russian, but their equipment looks American. Military contractors, probably." I peered through the reinforced glass of the stairwell door, studying the scene beyond. 3 figures in tactical gear moved between banks of communication equipment, their movements coordinated with military precision. But what caught my attention was the technology they were using: satellite communication arrays that looked disturbingly familiar, equipment that matched the specifications I'd worked with during my own assignments. "Hugo," I breathed, recognition hitting me like a physical blow. "That's our equipment. They're using American military communication systems to coordinate their attack." "Inside job," Hugo confirmed, his voice hard with betrayal. "Someone's been selling our technology to hostile forces. Felix, we need to get into that communication center and establish contact with the outside world, but we'll have to neutralize the hostiles first." The weight of his words settled over me like a lead blanket. I was an engineer, not a soldier. My expertise was in satellite systems and quantum encryption, not tactical combat. But 11 minutes until Miami went dark, and we were America's last hope for preventing a coordinated electromagnetic attack on our major cities. "What's the plan?" I asked, though my voice betrayed the fear that was eating at my guts. "Direct assault," Hugo said, checking his weapon with practiced efficiency. I'll create a distraction at the main entrance while you circle around to the emergency access panel. Once you're inside, establish contact with the Northrop Grumman facility and get those override codes. I'll handle the hostiles. Commander, I said, studying the tactical situation, you're talking about a 1-against-3 assault. Those aren't good odds. They're the only odds we have, Hugo replied, his steel-gray eyes reflecting the weight of impossible choices. Felix, I need you to understand something. If we fail here, if we can't regain control of our satellites, American civilization ends in 11 minutes. Are you prepared for that responsibility? I looked through the reinforced glass at the communication center, watching hostile forces use our own technology against us. Somewhere below, Giselle was fighting a digital battle she couldn't win alone. Somewhere above, for electromagnetic weapons hung over America's major cities like digital swords of Damocles. And here in the space between, two people were preparing to fight for the survival of everything we held dear. I'm ready, I said, checking my own equipment one final time. Let's go save our country. Hugo nodded, his tactical mind already calculating angles of approach and fields of fire. On my mark. 3, 2, 1, execute. The assault began with Hugo's calculated breach of the main entrance, a controlled explosive charge that he'd improvised from maintenance equipment, filling the communication center with blinding light and deafening concussion. The three hostiles immediately responded with military precision, their weapons trained on the main entrance as they prepared to repel boarders. Through the security monitors, I watched muzzle flashes strobe in the smoke-filled chamber as automatic weapons fire erupted like mechanical thunder. While they were distracted, I moved through the emergency access panel with engineering precision, my knowledge of facility layouts guiding me through maintenance corridors that reeked of ozone and overheated electronics. The communication equipment was state-of-the-art, but it followed standard military specifications that I understood intimately. Quantum encrypted arrays that hummed with barely contained power, their supercooled processors generating electromagnetic interference that made my teeth ache. But as I began establishing contact with the outside world, I realized the horrible truth about our situation. The communication systems had been modified, their encryption protocols replaced with quantum-level security that I'd never seen before. Someone had been preparing for this moment for months, building backdoors and vulnerabilities into our most critical systems. Northrop Grumman Development Team, this is Felix Morrison, Peterson Space Force Base. I transmitted, hoping the signal would penetrate the electromagnetic interference. We have a critical situation requiring immediate override code access. For military satellites have been hijacked and are prepared to launch electromagnetic attacks on American cities. We need quantum encryption keys for satellite control override. The response came through static-filled channels that crackled with interference. Felix Morrison, this is Dr. Sarah Chun, Northrop Grumman, Colorado Springs. We've been monitoring the satellite hijacking situation. The override codes you need are stored in quantum encrypted servers, but accessing them requires physical presence at our facility. Dr. Chun, I replied, watching Hugo's tactical assault unfold through the communication center's security monitors. We have 9 minutes until the first electromagnetic strike. Is there any way to transmit the override codes remotely? Negative, came the reply. The quantum encryption requires biometric authentication and physical key insertion. But Felix, we might have another option. Our development team has been working on experimental override protocols that could regain satellite control without the primary encryption keys. Hope flickered in my chest like a candle in hurricane winds. What kind of experimental protocols? Quantum entanglement override, Dr. Chin explained, her voice cutting through electronic interference. We can establish a direct quantum link with the hijacked satellites and force them to respond to our commands. But it requires precise coordination and specific equipment. Equipment we don't have, I said, studying the communication center's available technology. Dr. Chin, we need alternatives. What can we do with standard military communication arrays? There might be something, she replied, and I could hear the sound of rapid calculation in her voice. The hijacked satellites are using quantum encryption, but they're still connected to our standard communication network. If we can overload their quantum processors with recursive calculation loops, we might be able to crash their control systems. The idea hit me like lightning. A quantum denial of service attack. Force their encryption systems to process impossible calculations until they crash. Exactly, Dr. Chin confirmed. But Felix, it would require coordinated transmission from multiple communication arrays, and the timing would have to be precise down to the nanosecond. Through the security monitors, I watched Hugo's assault reach its climax. 2 hostiles down, blood pooling on concrete floors, and the commander was moving with tactical precision that spoke of decades of military experience. His movements were economical, professional, deadly, each shot placed with surgical accuracy. But the 3rd hostile had found cover behind a bank of quantum processors, using our own equipment as a shield while returning fire with automatic weapons that filled the air with the sharp crack of supersonic projectiles. The sound of ricocheting bullets mixed with the electronic whine of damaged equipment, creating a symphony of destruction that echoed through the communication center. Sparks cascaded from damaged displays, and the acrid smell of burning electronics filled the air with toxic smoke that made my eyes water and my throat burn. "Dr. Chun," I said, my fingers flying across the communication array's interface, "I'm going to need you to walk me through the quantum denial of service protocol. We have 8 minutes to crash their encryption systems and regain control of our satellites." "Understood," she replied. "But Felix, you need to know something. The quantum denial of service attack will overload our own communication systems as well. Once we start the attack, we'll be completely cut off from the outside world." The weight of her words settled over me like a burial shroud. We were about to cut ourselves off from all external support, gambling everything on an experimental protocol that might not work. But with 8 minutes until an electromagnetic strike on Miami, it was the only chance we had. "Dr. Chin," I said, watching countdown timers tick away on multiple screens, "let's crash their quantum encryption and save our country." But as I transmitted the attack protocols, watching mathematical sequences flow through the satellite network like digital viruses, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Not our alarms, theirs. The hostile forces had activated some kind of failsafe system, and the quantum processors around me began overheating with dangerous intensity. "Felix," Hugo's voice crackled through the communication system, distorted by electronic interference and the sound of continuing gunfire. "The quantum cores are reaching critical temperature. We need to evacuate immediately." I looked at the countdown timer, 6:47 and falling. 6 minutes until Miami went dark. 6 minutes to complete the quantum denial of service attack and regain control of our satellites. But the overheating processors were filling the air with toxic smoke and electromagnetic radiation that made my skin crawl with static electricity. "Dr. Chun," I transmitted, my voice steady despite the chaos surrounding me. "The quantum denial of service attack is causing system overloads. How much longer do we need to maintain the transmission?" "At least 4 more minutes," came the reply through increasingly distorted channels. "The recursive calculation loops need time to propagate through their entire network." "But Felix, your quantum processors are reaching dangerous temperatures. You need to evacuate immediately." The impossible choice crystallized in my mind with horrible clarity. Evacuate now and save my own life, but let Miami die in an electromagnetic holocaust. Or stay and complete the attack, knowing that the overheating quantum processors might kill me before the job was finished. Through the security monitors, I watched Hugo take a bullet in the shoulder, the impact spinning him around as blood sprayed across damaged equipment. But he kept fighting, his weapon trained on the remaining hostile with mechanical precision. The man was bleeding, wounded, but he wasn't stopping. None of us were stopping. "Commander," I called through the communication system, "I need 4 more minutes to complete the quantum attack. Can you hold your position?" "Felix," Hugo replied, his voice tight with pain but steady with determination, "I'll hold this position until the job is done. You focus on those satellites." The quantum processors around me were glowing with dangerous heat, their cooling systems overwhelmed by the massive calculations required for the denial of service attack. The air itself seemed to shimmer with electromagnetic radiation, and I could taste metal in my mouth as the charged particles began affecting my nervous system. But the attack was working. On the communication displays, I could see the hijacked satellites beginning to respond to our commands. Their quantum encryption was crashing under the weight of impossible calculations, and control systems were reverting to backup protocols that we could access. "Dr. Chun," I transmitted, watching satellite control indicators flicker between hostile and friendly status. "It's working. The encryption systems are crashing. How much longer?" 2 more minutes, she replied, her voice cutting through increasing static. "The quantum entanglement is breaking down. but we need to maintain the attack until complete system failure occurs. 2 more minutes. I stared at the overheating processors, their surfaces glowing like metal in a forge. The temperature in the communication center was rising beyond human tolerance, and I could feel my skin beginning to burn from the electromagnetic radiation. But Miami was still 6 minutes away from electronic death, and I was America's last hope. Hugo, I called, my voice hoarse from the toxic smoke. How are you holding up? Still breathing, he replied, though I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. Felix, the hostel is down, but I'm reading multiple breach points throughout the facility. We've got company coming. More hostiles. More enemies inside Peterson Space Force Base. More betrayal from within our own ranks. But the quantum denial of service attack was nearly complete, and control of our satellites was almost within reach. Dr. Chun, I transmitted, watching the countdown timer reach 5 o'clock and falling. I need confirmation that the attack is working. Are we regaining control of the satellites? Affirmative, she replied, her voice filled with professional triumph. Satellite control is reverting to American military protocols. The quantum encryption has been successfully crashed. Felix, you've done it. The quantum processors around me finally began cooling as the massive calculations came to an end. The overheating subsided, the electromagnetic radiation diminished, and for the first time in hours, I could breathe without tasting metal in my mouth. But the countdown timer still read 4:32 and falling. For minutes until Miami went dark. For minutes to complete the satellite shutdown and prevent an electromagnetic attack on American soil. The quantum processors had cooled, but the countdown timer still burned in my retinas. 4:32 and falling. For minutes until Miami's 8 million souls were swept into electromagnetic darkness. The denial of service attack had crashed their encryption, but the satellites themselves remained armed and targeted. We had access, but access meant nothing without the authorization to issue shutdown commands. Dr. Chun, I transmitted through the smoke-filled communication center. We've regained satellite access, but I need the actual shutdown protocols. How do we disarm the electromagnetic weapons? Her voice crackled through static that seemed to claw at my eardrums. Felix, the shutdown requires dual-key authentication. Military protocol demands 2 separate authorization codes, entered simultaneously from different locations. You need someone at the backup control facility. The backup facility. My stomach clenched with cold realization. The backup control facility was 60 feet below ground, in the quantum cathedral where I'd left Giselle alone with technology that defied comprehension. She'd been down there for over an hour, fighting digital battles she couldn't win while I'd been playing soldier in the upper levels. Giselle, I called through the facility's internal communication system, praying the quantum interference hadn't severed our connection. Giselle, do you copy? Silence. Static. The electronic hiss of overloaded systems struggling to maintain basic functions. Giselle, I called again, desperation creeping into my voice. I need you to respond. We have 4 minutes to prevent an electromagnetic strike on Miami. The silence stretched like a blade against my throat. Through the security monitors, I could see Hugo slumped against a bank of damaged equipment, his shoulder wound seeping blood through tactical gear designed to stop bullets, but not the human cost of betrayal. His steel-gray eyes remained alert, scanning for threats, but his body language spoke of exhaustion that went beyond physical injury. Felix, Hugo's voice cut through the communication static, the backup facility has been sealed since the lockdown began. Environmental controls show the quantum cathedral is operating on emergency power, but there's no response from internal sensors. Emergency power. Sealed environment. No response from sensors. The implications struck me like hammer blows. Giselle had been trapped in the quantum cathedral for over an hour, breathing recycled air in a space designed for temporary occupation. The environmental systems were failing, and she was suffocating. Commander, I said, my engineering mind calculating atmospheric requirements and emergency protocols. How long can someone survive in the quantum cathedral on emergency power? Depends on the person, Hugo replied, his tactical mind already running worst-case scenarios. But Felix, the quantum processors generate electromagnetic interference that affects biological systems. Extended exposure can cause neurological damage, respiratory distress, cellular breakdown at the molecular level. The countdown timer read 3:47 and falling. 3 minutes until Miami went dark. 3 minutes to save 8 million people. But saving them meant sacrificing Giselle, leaving her trapped in an electromagnetic tomb while I focused on the mission. Dr. Chun, I transmitted, my voice steady despite the chaos tearing at my insides. Can the dual key authentication be bypassed? Is there any way to shut down the satellites from a single location? Negative, she replied, her voice carrying the weight of inflexible military protocol. The electromagnetic weapons are designed to prevent unauthorized shutdown. Dual key authentication is hardwired into the quantum processors. You need someone at the backup facility. I stared at the communication displays, watching satellite control indicators flicker between friendly and hostile status. The hijacked satellites were still armed, still targeted, still capable of reducing Miami to an electromagnetic wasteland. But the only person who could help me stop them was trapped 60 feet below ground, slowly suffocating in a space filled with quantum radiation. Giselle, I called again, adjusting communication frequencies to penetrate the electromagnetic interference. I know you can hear me. I need you to respond. Please. A burst of static filled the air, followed by a voice so weak it was barely audible. Felix, quantum processors, overheating, hard to breathe. Relief flooded through me like a drug. She was alive, barely conscious, but alive. Giselle, I need you to listen carefully. We have 3 minutes to prevent an electromagnetic attack on Miami. I need you to access the backup satellite control system and prepare for dual key authentication. Felix, her voice was strained, distorted by electronic interference and the effects of prolonged exposure to quantum radiation. Something's wrong. The quantum processors they're not responding to standard protocols. Not responding to standard protocols. The words sent ice through my veins. The quantum processors in the cathedral were experimental technology, designed to interface with satellite systems through quantum entanglement. If they weren't responding to standard protocols, it meant the quantum field itself was destabilizing. Giselle, I said, my voice urgent with more than just the countdown timer. You need to evacuate the quantum cathedral immediately. The quantum processors are becoming unstable. They could collapse into a resonance cascade that would destroy the entire facility. Can't, she whispered, her voice barely audible through the static. Emergency seals, activated during lockdown, door won't open. Felix, I'm trapped. Trapped. The word echoed in my mind like a death sentence. The emergency seals were designed to contain quantum experiments that went wrong, preventing dangerous radiation from escaping into the rest of the facility. They were controlled by the base's central computer, and they wouldn't open until the quantum field stabilized. Hugo, I called, studying the facility's emergency protocols on the communication displays. Can we override the emergency seals from here? Negative, he replied, his voice tight with pain and exhaustion. The seals are hardwired into the quantum containment system. They'll only open when the quantum field drops below critical levels. The countdown timer read 2:58 and falling. 2 minutes until Miami went dark. 2 minutes to choose between saving 8 million strangers or saving the one person who mattered most to me in the world. Dr. Chun, I transmitted, my voice hollow with the weight of impossible choices. If the quantum processors in the backup facility are destabilizing, what happens to dual key authentication? The authentication becomes impossible, she replied, her voice carrying the finality of physical law. But Felix, there might be another option. The experimental override protocols I mentioned earlier, they don't require dual key authentication. They use quantum entanglement to establish direct control over the satellite systems. What do you need? I asked, hope flickering in my chest like a candle in hurricane winds. Complete quantum resonance between the primary and backup facilities, she explained. The quantum processors need to be synchronized at the subatomic level. It's never been tested on military satellites, but theoretically it should work. Theoretically, I repeated, staring at the countdown timer. What are the risks? If the quantum fields destabilize during synchronization, both facilities could experience cascading quantum collapse. The electromagnetic feedback could destroy every electronic system within a 10-mile radius. The choice crystallized in my mind with horrible clarity. Attempt the experimental override and risk destroying Peterson Space Force Base, or accept that Miami would die in 2 minutes and 37 seconds. But there was a third option, one that made my chest tighten with grief and determination. Giselle, I called through the communication system. I need you to help me save Miami. We're going to attempt quantum synchronization between the primary and backup facilities. It's dangerous, but it's our only chance. Felix. Her voice was weaker now, distorted by the effects of quantum radiation on her nervous system. I can barely. The interfaces are. Everything's spinning. She was dying. The quantum radiation was slowly killing her, breaking down her cellular structure at the molecular level. But she was still conscious, still capable of operating the quantum processors that could save 8 million lives. Giselle, I said, my voice gentle despite the urgency of the countdown, I need you to access the quantum synchronization protocol. Look for the interface labeled Entanglement Resonance Control. Can you find it? Yes, she whispered, her voice barely audible. But Felix, the quantum field it's beautiful, like looking into the heart of the universe. Quantum delirium. The radiation was affecting her brain chemistry, creating hallucinations and euphoria that preceded complete neurological collapse. She had minutes, maybe less, before the quantum field killed her. Giselle, I said, my voice urgent with desperation, I need you to focus. Find the entanglement resonance control and prepare for synchronization. On my mark, we're going to establish quantum links with the hijacked satellites. Felix, Hugo's voice cut through the communication static. I'm reading massive electromagnetic buildup in both facilities. The quantum processors are drawing power levels that exceed safe operating parameters. If this goes wrong, we die. I finished, watching the countdown timer reach 1:45 and falling. But if we don't try, Miami dies in less than 2 minutes. I positioned myself at the primary facility's quantum interface, my hands trembling as I accessed controls that could save millions of lives or destroy everything within a 10-mile radius. The quantum processors hummed with barely contained power, their surfaces glowing with electromagnetic energy that made my teeth ache and my skin crawl with static electricity. Giselle, I called, praying she was still conscious enough to respond. Are you ready for quantum synchronization? Ready, she whispered, her voice distant and dreamlike. Felix, if this doesn't work, tell Mom and Dad. You're going to tell them yourself, I said, my voice fierce with determination. We're both going to walk out of this facility and tell them how we saved Miami. But even as I spoke the words, I knew they were lies. The quantum synchronization would require her to remain at the controls until the process was complete, and the radiation levels were already beyond human tolerance. She was going to die to save 8 million strangers, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Dr. Chun, I transmitted, my fingers hovering over the quantum interface. We're ready to begin synchronization. What's the procedure? Initiate quantum entanglement on my mark, she replied, her voice cutting through the static. Felix, once you begin the process, you cannot stop. The quantum fields will be locked in resonance until the satellites are either shut down or destroyed. The countdown timer read 1:12 and falling. 1 minute until Miami went dark. 1 minute to save 8 million lives. 1 minute to lose the person I loved most in the world. Giselle, I called, my voice soft with love and grief. I'm going to begin the quantum synchronization now. Are you ready? Ready, she whispered, her voice barely audible through the static. Felix, I love you, tell everyone. I love them. I love you too, I said, my voice breaking with emotion. 3, 2, 1, initiate quantum entanglement. The quantum processors erupted with power that turned the air itself electric. Electromagnetic energy cascaded through both facilities, creating a resonance field that connected the primary and backup systems at the subatomic level. The hijacked satellites, 400 miles above the Earth, suddenly found themselves linked to quantum processors that commanded them to stand down. But the synchronization was killing Giselle. Through the communication system, I could hear her breathing becoming labored, her voice growing weaker as the quantum field slowly tore apart her cellular structure. The radiation was beyond lethal now, and she was staying at the controls only through sheer force of will. Satellite control established, I reported, watching the hijacked weapons finally respond to our commands. Beginning electromagnetic weapon shutdown sequence. The countdown timer read 0:47 and falling. 47 seconds until Miami went dark. 47 seconds to complete the shutdown and save 8 million lives. But the quantum synchronization was holding, and the satellites were responding to our commands. Giselle, I called, my voice urgent with hope. We're doing it. The satellites are shutting down. You can evacuate the quantum cathedral now. Silence. Static. The electronic hiss of quantum processors operating beyond their design limits. Giselle, I called again, desperation clawing at my throat. Respond. The mission is complete. You can leave the quantum cathedral. Felix. Her voice was barely a whisper, distorted by electromagnetic interference and the effects of lethal radiation exposure. The quantum field, it's so beautiful, like stars being born. She was dying. The quantum radiation had progressed beyond cellular damage to complete neurological collapse. But she was still maintaining the synchronization, still holding the quantum field stable, while the satellites powered down their electromagnetic weapons. Giselle, I said, my voice soft with love and grief, you've saved 8 million lives. You can let go now. Felix, she whispered, her voice fading like a radio signal disappearing into static. Take care of everyone. Tell them, we won. The communication system went silent. The quantum field in the backup facility began to destabilize as the synchronization finally broke down. But the satellites were offline, their electromagnetic weapons powered down, their threat to Miami eliminated with 31 seconds to spare. I stared at the countdown timer as it reached midnight and stopped. Miami was safe. 8 million people would wake up tomorrow morning, never knowing how close they'd come to electromagnetic annihilation. But 60 feet below ground, in a quantum cathedral filled with deadly radiation, Giselle Morrison had given her life to save them all. Felix, Hugo's voice cut through the silence, gentle with understanding. The mission is complete. The satellites are offline. Miami is safe. I nodded, though no one could see me through the smoke and electromagnetic interference. The mission was complete. America was safe. But the cost had been higher than any of us could have imagined. Commander, I said, my voice hollow with exhaustion and grief, we need to secure the facility and prepare for cleanup operations. The quantum cathedral is contaminated with lethal radiation, and we have hostile forces throughout the base. Understood, Hugo replied, his tactical mind already planning the next phase of operations. Felix, I need you to know something. What you and Giselle did here today, it saved more than just Miami. It saved America. I looked at the communication displays, watching satellite control indicators showing friendly status across the board. The hijacked weapons were offline, their electromagnetic payloads disabled, their threat to American cities eliminated. But the victory felt hollow, purchased with blood and sacrifice that no amount of strategic success could justify. Hugo, I said, my voice steady despite the grief tearing at my insides, let's go home. But first, I had to tell 8 million people in Miami that they were safe. And I had to tell my parents that their daughter had died a hero, saving lives she would never meet, in a battle that would never be recorded in any history book. The quantum cathedral was silent now, its processors cooling in the aftermath of lethal synchronization. Somewhere in that electromagnetic tomb, Giselle Morrison had given her life for America, and I would carry that sacrifice with me for the rest of my days. The countdown timer read midnight, and Miami was safe. But the cost of victory would haunt me forever. The quantum processors had gone silent, but the real battle was just beginning. 3 floors above Giselle's tomb, I pressed my face against the reinforced glass of the satellite control room, watching Isla's fingers dance across interfaces that still sparked with residual electromagnetic energy. The countdown to Miami's destruction had stopped, but 12 other satellites remained active, their targeting systems locked onto Boston, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. The hijacked satellites were offline, their weapons disabled, but the conspirators who'd orchestrated this nightmare were still alive, still armed, and still desperate enough to kill anyone who could expose them. Felix, Hugo's voice crackled through my earpiece, each word punctuated by the wheeze of damaged lungs. I'm reading movement in the primary access corridor. 6 hostiles, armed with automatic weapons, advancing on your position. They're not leaving witnesses. I checked the tactical display, watching red dots converge on the satellite control room like predators closing in for the kill. The defense contractors who'd orchestrated this betrayal were making their final play. Eliminate anyone who could expose their conspiracy to sell America's nuclear deterrent to foreign powers. How long until base security arrives? I asked, my engineering mind calculating angles and cover positions in a room designed for technical work, not urban warfare. Security's been compromised from the beginning, Hugo replied, his voice carrying the bitter taste of betrayal. The contractors have people embedded in every level of base operations. We're alone in this. Isla looked up from the satellite controls, her face pale with exhaustion and the weight of redemption. Felix, I've isolated 8 of the remaining satellites, but for a still locked in active targeting mode. The quantum synchronization that saved Miami created cascade failures in the control pathways. I need 15 minutes to manually override each targeting system. 15 minutes. The approaching hostiles would breach our position in less than 3. I studied the room's layout through the smoke and electromagnetic interference, identifying cover positions among the banks of quantum processors and satellite tracking equipment. The room's electromagnetic shielding might stop interference, but it wouldn't stop bullets. Isla, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos. Keep working on the shutdown. I'll hold them off. With whatever I can find, I said, grabbing a piece of steel debris from the damaged door frame. Isla, keep working on those satellites. Every minute you need is another minute I have to buy us. Felix, she said, her voice breaking, you're a satellite engineer. These are professional killers. And those satellites are targeting American cities, I replied, positioning myself behind a quantum processor that still hummed with residual energy. My sister died to stop Miami from being destroyed. I'm not letting Boston and Philadelphia follow. Hugo, I transmitted, I need tactical advice. 6 hostiles approaching the satellite control room. I have minimal cover and no military training. Felix, Hugo's voice cut through the static, listen carefully. The satellite control room has 2 access points, the main corridor and the emergency exit. You need to create a bottleneck at the main entrance and use the quantum processors as cover. I moved to the main entrance, a reinforced doorway that led to the corridor where the hostiles were advancing. The door itself was designed to seal automatically during quantum experiments, but the electromagnetic interference from the synchronization had damaged its control systems. I could manually engage the locks, but they wouldn't hold against military-grade explosives. Isla, I called, the door locks are damaged. How long can you hold the emergency exit? I can't leave the controls, she replied, her voice tense with concentration. The shutdown sequence requires constant monitoring. If I step away from the interface, the satellites could reactivate their weapons. The tactical display showed the hostiles reaching the final corridor junction. 30 seconds until they reached the satellite control room. 30 seconds to prepare for a battle I had no training to fight. I positioned myself behind a bank of quantum processors, using the electromagnetic shielding as cover. The processors themselves were still warm from the synchronization, their surfaces glowing with residual energy that made my teeth ache. But they were solid, reinforced against quantum fluctuations, and they might stop bullets. The first explosion echoed through the facility like thunder, followed by the screech of steel being torn apart. The hostiles were using shaped charges to breach the security barriers, their advance methodical and professional. Through the tactical display, I watched them move with the precision of soldiers who'd done this before. Movement in the outer corridor, one of them reported, his voice calm despite the circumstances. 2 targets confirmed in the satellite control room. Orders are to eliminate all witnesses and secure the control systems. Understood, another voice replied. Clean sweep. No survivors. The words sent ice through my veins. These weren't just contractors covering their tracks. They were executioners sent to eliminate anyone who could expose the conspiracy to sell America's nuclear deterrent to foreign powers. I checked the satellite controls, watching Isla's desperate work. The remaining 4 satellites were locked in active targeting mode, their electromagnetic weapons powered and ready to fire on Boston, Philadelphia, Atlanta, and Washington, D.C. The quantum cascade that had saved Miami had created system failures that required manual override of each targeting computer. 12 minutes, she said, sweat beading on her forehead despite the facility's emergency cooling. The quantum interference corrupted the targeting protocols. I have to manually convince each satellite that it's facing a system malfunction. 12 minutes. The hostiles would breach our position in less than 2. I pressed myself against the quantum processors, feeling their electromagnetic fields making my skin crawl with static electricity. The machines were still connected to the satellite network, still channeling power levels that could disrupt electronic systems. The second explosion was closer, followed by the metallic screech of reinforced doors being torn from their hinges. The hostiles were in the inner corridor now, less than 50 feet from the satellite control room. I could hear their voices, calm and professional, coordinating their advance like the trained killers they were. Movement in the target area, one of them said, his voice carrying the flat accent of military contractors. 2 subjects confirmed in the satellite control room. Rules of engagement? Another voice asked. Eliminate all witnesses, the first voice replied. No survivors. No survivors. The words sent ice through my veins. These weren't soldiers following orders or patriots defending their country. They were murderers, willing to kill anyone who threatened their conspiracy. Felix, Hugo's voice cut through the static. I'm reading thermal signatures in the corridor. They're using military-grade equipment. Stay behind hard cover and don't expose yourself. I pressed myself against the quantum processors, feeling their electromagnetic fields making my skin crawl with static electricity. The machines were still operational, still connected to the satellite network, still capable of channeling power that could fry electronic systems. An idea formed in my mind, desperate and dangerous. The quantum processors were still connected to the satellite network, channeling electromagnetic energy at frequencies that could disrupt unshielded electronics. If I could create a controlled overload, the resulting pulse might disable the hostiles' weapons and communication gear. Isla, I called, can you isolate the satellite controls from an electromagnetic pulse? What? She asked, her voice strained with concentration. Felix, an uncontrolled pulse could fry every system in this room, including the satellites we're trying to shut down. A controlled pulse, I said, my engineering mind calculating power levels and frequency modulations. Just enough to disable their electronics without destroying our systems. Maybe, she said, her fingers never stopping their work on the targeting overrides. The control systems have military-grade shielding, but I'd need 40 seconds to engage full isolation protocols. 40 seconds. The hostiles would be in the room in less than 30. I listened to their voices growing closer, professional and calm as they discussed breach procedures and target elimination. They were taking their time, confident in their superior numbers and firepower. Hugo, I transmitted, I'm going to overload the quantum processors and create an electromagnetic pulse. It might disable the hostiles' equipment. Felix, Hugo's voice was sharp with concern. Electromagnetic pulses are unpredictable. You could disable your own systems, or worse, create a feedback loop that destroys the entire facility. The entire facility is already compromised, I replied, watching Isla work frantically to isolate the satellite controls. If these people reach the control room, they'll kill us and reactivate the satellites. Miami will be destroyed. The third explosion was directly outside the satellite control room. The hostiles had reached the main entrance and were preparing to breach the reinforced door. I could see shaped charges being positioned against the door frame, their timers set for synchronized detonation. Isolation protocols engaged, Isla announced, her voice tight with concentration. The satellite controls are shielded, but the pulse will destroy everything else in this room. Do it, I said, my hand hovering over the quantum processor overload controls. On my mark. The final explosion shattered the reinforced door, filling the room with smoke and the acrid smell of military-grade explosives. Through the haze, I could see 6 figures in tactical gear moving with lethal precision, their weapons raised and ready. Control room secured, the lead hostile reported, his voice mechanically calm. Beginning target elimination. Isolation protocols engaged, Isla announced, her voice tight with concentration. Electromagnetic shielding is active, but the pulse will destroy everything else in this room. Do it, I said, my hand hovering over the quantum processor's emergency overload controls. On my mark. The hostiles spread out through the smoke, their thermal imaging giving them a tactical advantage in the electromagnetic chaos. I could see the lead figure raising his weapon, targeting Isla at the control station. She was seconds away from completing the satellite shutdown, seconds away from saving millions of lives. Now, I shouted, engaging the quantum processor overload. The room erupted in electromagnetic chaos. The quantum processors discharged their stored energy in a controlled pulse that turned the air itself electric. The hostiles' weapons died instantly, their targeting systems fried by the electromagnetic surge. Their communication gear followed, leaving them deaf and blind in a room filled with crackling energy. But they were still alive, still dangerous, and still carrying backup weapons that didn't rely on electronics. Felix, Isla screamed, her voice barely audible over the electromagnetic chaos. The pulse is cascading. It's feeding back into the satellite network. I looked at the satellite controls, watching display screens flicker and die as the electromagnetic pulse propagated through the quantum processors. The isolation protocols were failing, overwhelmed by power levels that exceeded their design parameters. Cut the connection. I shouted, my voice hoarse with electromagnetic interference. Sever the satellite links before the pulse reaches the orbital platforms. I can't, she replied, her hands flying across controls that sparked and smoked with overloaded circuits. The quantum entanglement is locked in. If I sever the connection now, the satellites will revert to their hijacked programming. The hostiles were advancing through the smoke, their backup weapons raised, their movements hampered by the electromagnetic interference but still deadly. I could see the lead figure raising a pistol, his targeting compromised by the pulse, but his intent unmistakable. Hugo, I transmitted, praying the communication systems were still functional. I need immediate backup in the satellite control room. The electromagnetic pulse disabled their primary weapons, but they're still armed and dangerous. Felix, Hugo's voice crackled through static. I'm reading massive electromagnetic feedback in the satellite network. The pulse is propagating through the quantum entanglement links. It's going to reach the orbital platforms in less than 60 seconds. 60 seconds. If the electromagnetic pulse reached the hijacked satellites, it would either disable them completely or trigger their failsafe systems. The weapons could fire automatically, targeting every major city on the East Coast with electromagnetic warheads that would reduce America to a pre-industrial wasteland. Isla, I called, ducking behind a bank of damaged quantum processors as the lead hostile opened fire. You have to complete the shutdown sequence. The pulse is going to reach the satellites in less than a minute. I'm trying, she screamed, her voice strained with desperation. But the control systems are failing. The electromagnetic interference is corrupting the shutdown protocols. The gunfire was getting closer, bullets ricocheting off the quantum processors and embedding themselves in the reinforced walls. The hostiles were advancing methodically, using the smoke and electromagnetic interference as cover while they closed the distance to the control station. I looked at the satellite tracking displays, watching orbital platforms go dark one by one as the electromagnetic pulse propagated through the quantum entanglement network. Some satellites were shutting down cleanly, their weapons disabled by the pulse. Others were triggering failsafe systems, their targeting computers preparing to fire on predetermined coordinates. Felix, Hugo's voice cut through the chaos, I'm reading satellite activations across the entire network. The pulse is triggering automatic launch sequences. You have 30 seconds before the first electromagnetic warhead fires. 30 seconds. I looked at Isla, still working frantically at the control station, despite the gunfire and electromagnetic chaos. Her face was pale with concentration, her fingers dancing across interfaces that sparked and smoked with overloaded circuits. Isla, I said, my voice calm despite the approaching disaster. You need to choose. Save the satellites or save yourself. I'm not leaving, she replied, her voice fierce with determination. These people killed my colleagues, hijacked my work, and tried to destroy American cities. I'm not letting them win. The lead hostile was 10 feet away now, his pistol raised, his intentions clear. But the electromagnetic pulse had damaged his targeting systems, and he was firing blind through smoke and crackling energy. His shots went wide, embedding themselves in the quantum processors and control panels. I grabbed a piece of debris from the damaged door, a metal fragment heavy enough to serve as a weapon. It wasn't much against a trained killer, but it was all I had. I waited until he was within striking distance, then launched myself from behind the quantum processors. The impact drove us both to the floor, his pistol skittering across the room as we struggled for control. He was stronger, better trained, and more experienced in close combat. But I was fighting for 8 million lives in Miami, for my dead sister, and for the future of America. Isla, I shouted, grappling with the hostile. Complete the shutdown. Now. 10 seconds, she replied, her voice tight with concentration. The final satellite is responding to the override commands. The hostile broke free from my grip, reaching for a backup weapon. But the electromagnetic pulse had damaged his equipment, and his movements were slowed by the crackling energy that filled the room. I grabbed his weapon hand, struggling to keep the gun pointed away from Isla. Shutdown complete, Isla announced, her voice triumphant despite the chaos. All satellites are offline. The electromagnetic weapons are disabled. The satellite tracking displays confirmed her words. One by one, the hijacked weapons were powering down, their targeting systems disabled, their threat to American cities eliminated. The conspiracy was broken, the attack prevented, and America was safe. But the cost had been higher than any of us could have imagined. The electromagnetic pulse had damaged critical systems throughout the facility. The quantum cathedral was contaminated with lethal radiation, and Giselle Morrison had given her life to save millions of strangers. Felix, Hugo's voice crackled through the static. Base security is secure. The remaining hostiles have been neutralized. The facility is clear. I looked around the satellite control room, taking in the damage and destruction. The quantum processors were beyond repair, their circuits fried by the electromagnetic pulse. The control systems were smoking ruins, their displays dark and lifeless. But the satellites were offline, their weapons disabled, and America was safe. "Commander," I said, my voice hollow with exhaustion and grief, "mission accomplished. The satellites are secure, the conspiracy is broken, and the immediate threat is eliminated." "Understood," Hugo replied, his voice gentle with understanding. "Felix, I need you to know something. What you and your team did here today saved more than just Miami. You saved America." I nodded, though no one could see me through the smoke and electromagnetic interference. America was safe. The satellites were secure. The conspiracy was broken. But the victory felt hollow, purchased with blood and sacrifice that no amount of strategic success could justify. Isla approached me, her face streaked with tears and smoke. "Felix," she said, her voice soft with grief, "I'm sorry about Giselle. She died a hero. She died to save 8 million people she'd never met." I replied, my voice steady despite the emotion choking my throat. "She died because corrupt contractors sold America's security to the highest bidder. She died because good people had to pay the price for other people's greed." The facility was silent now, its quantum processors cooling in the aftermath of electromagnetic warfare. Somewhere in the quantum cathedral, Giselle Morrison lay dead, her sacrifice ensuring that American cities would wake up tomorrow morning without fear of electromagnetic annihilation. "Felix," Hugo's voice cut through the silence, "we need to debrief and prepare for cleanup operations. The quantum cathedral is contaminated with lethal radiation, and we have hostile casualties throughout the facility." I looked at the satellite tracking displays one final time, watching the indicators show friendly status across the board. The hijacked weapons were offline, their electromagnetic payloads disabled, their threat to American cities eliminated forever. "Commander," I said, my voice carrying the weight of victory and loss, "let's go home." But first, I had to tell 8 million people in Miami that they were safe. I had to explain to investigators how defense contractors had sold America's security to foreign agents. And I had to tell my parents that their daughter had died saving lives she would never meet, in a battle that would never be recorded in any history book. The quantum cathedral was silent now, its processors cooling in the aftermath of lethal synchronization. The satellite control room was a smoking ruin, its systems destroyed by the electromagnetic pulse that had saved America. But the satellites were secure, the conspiracy was broken, and the immediate threat was eliminated. The cost of victory would haunt me forever. But America was safe, and that was what mattered. The mission was complete. The satellites were offline. And somewhere in the quantum cathedral, Giselle Morrison had given her life for her country, ensuring that freedom would survive another day. America was safe. The price had been paid in blood and sacrifice, but America was safe. The mission was complete.